The date is August 28, 1989. The Brendan Byrne Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, pulses with the electricity of 20,000 rabid wrestling fans. Tonight is SummerSlam, and in the main event, two titans of sports entertainment prepare for battle. Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake face Macho Man Randy Savage and Zeus. For Brutus Beefcake, this moment represents the pinnacle of professional wrestling achievement. Here he stands, not merely as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as a co-main eventer during the World Wrestling Federation's golden era, when the company's reach extended far beyond wrestling into the cultural zeitgeist of America itself. This is the same Brutus Beefcake who, just months later, would headline another pay-per-view spectacle, the no-holds-barred event, again standing shoulder to shoulder with Hulk Hogan in a steel cage match against the very same opponents. By April 1990, at WrestleMania VI, he would achieve what many considered impossible, becoming the first person to pin the seemingly invincible Mr. Perfect on wrestling's grandest stage, positioning himself for what appeared to be an inevitable run with the Intercontinental Championship. The wrestling world lay at his feet, success beckoning from every corner of the squared circle. Yet in July 1990, just 3 months after his WrestleMania triumph, one tragic mistake would obliterate everything he had built. A split-second decision, a miscommunication, a moment of fate would transform him from ascending superstar to broken man fighting for his very life. The same face that had charmed millions would be mangled beyond recognition, requiring over 100 feet of wire and 32 screws to reconstruct. This is the story of how Brutus the Barber Beefcake went from main event glory to career-shattering catastrophe in a single devastating day. To understand the man and the tragedy, we must go back to the beginning. Before Brutus the Barber Beefcake, there was just Edward Harrison Leslie, a young man from Tampa, Florida, with big dreams and an even bigger personality. Following high school, he worked as a bouncer, but his life would change forever when he met a fellow aspiring wrestler named Terry Bollea. You probably know him better as Hulk Hogan. They were close friends, and their paths would be forever intertwined. They started their careers together, traveling from promotion to promotion in the late 1970s, billed as brothers under various names, including Terry and Ed Boulder and Dizzy and Hulk Hogan. Their early careers were a struggle, a grind of small-time shows, long drives and meager paydays. But they had a shared vision and a relentless drive to make it to the big leagues. In 1980, they both had a brief stint in the World Wrestling Federation, but they would soon go their separate ways, with Hogan going to the American Wrestling Association and Leslie bouncing around various territories, all while waiting for his chance to break through. That chance finally came in 1984. The Federation was undergoing a seismic shift. Under the vision of Vince McMahon, the company was no longer a regional wrestling promotion, but a national and soon-to-be global entertainment powerhouse. Hulk Hogan had returned to the Federation and was now positioned as the face of the company. McMahon knew that to create a compelling universe, he needed not only heroes, but also villains. So he brought back Hogan's old friend, Edward Leslie, and gave him a brand new persona, Brutus Beefcake. The gimmick was perfect for the over-the-top, cartoonish world of the Federation's golden era. Beefcake was a flamboyant, vain male stripper, complete with a new haircut and wild, outlandish outfits. He was managed by the charismatic and equally theatrical, luscious Johnny Valiant. Beefcake quickly established himself as a menacing heel. He started a feud with Hulk Hogan, wrestling him for the championship on a number of occasions, including a match in February 1985 that led to a major angle where Beefcake and Valiant injured Hogan's protege, Hillbilly Jim. During this period, Beefcake engaged in a contentious rivalry with David Sammartino, their conflict culminating in a chaotic double disqualification at the historic inaugural WrestleMania held at Madison Square Garden. In the summer of 1985, Beefcake's career would take another major turn when he began teaming with Greg the Hammer Valentine. Together they formed the Dream Team, a powerhouse duo that was both technically proficient and brutally effective. They quickly set their sights on the Tag Team Championship, which was held by the US Express. On August 24, 1985, the Dream Team defeated them in Philadelphia to win the titles. They would go on to hold the belts for 8 months, defending them against all comers, including the British Bulldogs, whom they would eventually lose the titles to at WrestleMania II. The Dream Team's run was a huge success, but like all good things in wrestling, it had to come to an end. The end came in spectacular fashion at WrestleMania III, the biggest wrestling event of all time to that point. After defeating the Rougeau brothers, a heated argument broke out between Beefcake, Valentine, and Valiant. The Dream Team was no more. The split set the stage for one of the most memorable moments in wrestling history. In the very next match, Rowdy Roddy Piper faced off against Adrian Adonis in a hair versus hair match. Beefcake eventually rushed to Roddy Piper's aid, reviving him after Adrian Adonis had left him unconscious, allowing Piper to seize victory. Bound by the stipulation, Adonis was forced to have his head shaved, a task Beefcake carried out with relish. In that moment, Brutus Beefcake was no longer a heel. He was a babyface, a fan favorite. And the new iconic Brutus the Barber Beefcake gimmick was born. The gimmick was a stroke of genius. It was fun, unique, and perfectly suited for the family-friendly era of the Federation. Beefcake started bringing a pair of oversized shears to the ring. With the handles painted like barber poles, he would put his opponents to sleep with the sleeper hold, then celebrate by snipping their hair and throwing the handfuls into the air. The fans loved it. He quickly became one of the most popular wrestlers in the company, and his feuds were always a main feature on television. He had a memorable rivalry with his former partner Valentine, but his biggest and most high-profile feud was with Honky Tonk Man, the Intercontinental Champion. For months, Beefcake chased Honky Tonk Man and his manager Jimmy Hart across the country. He vowed to take the title and give Honky Tonk Man a haircut he would never forget. However, Honky was a master of evasion, constantly getting himself disqualified to retain the title. The feud was a huge success, a classic good versus evil storyline that captivated audiences. While Beefcake never won the title from Honky Tonk Man, the feud elevated him to a new level of stardom. He became a staple of Saturday night's main event and a reliable draw on the house show circuit. He would go on to have other notable feuds, including a brutal one with the outlaw Ron Bass, and a rivalry with Randy Savage that would eventually lead to the main event spotlight we discussed earlier. But it was his association with Hulk Hogan that truly defined his career during this period. The two friends were a dynamic duo, a team that represented everything good and wholesome about the World Wrestling Federation. They were heroes, fighting against the forces of evil. And when they defeated Savage and Zeus in the steel cage match at No Holds Barred, it felt like a triumph for all of humanity. Then came WrestleMania VI, the victory over Mr. Perfect, and the whispers of a potential Intercontinental Championship run. All signs pointed to a bright, prosperous future for Brutus Beefcake. He was scheduled for a rematch with Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam 1990, this time for the coveted title. He had finally escaped the tag team and mid-card ranks and was on the cusp of becoming a legitimate singles champion. Then came the day in July 1990. Edward Leslie was with a friend who was preparing to go parasailing. As the friend was getting ready to take off, the boat driver mistook a cue and sped off, causing the parasailer to slam his knees directly into Leslie's face. The impact was catastrophic. His face was crushed, his jaw shattered, his nasal cavity destroyed. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors observed damage so severe that he was no longer able to breathe on his own. Leslie later recalled the pain as unbearable. He would spend months in recovery, undergoing extensive surgery to rebuild his face. It was a miracle he survived. Over 100 feet of wire and 32 screws were used to reconstruct his facial skeleton. He was forced to watch from the sidelines as his career-defining title shot at SummerSlam went to a replacement, the Texas Tornado. The parasailing accident changed everything. It took him out of the ring for 2 years, and in many ways, it was a tragedy he would never fully recover from. When he finally returned to the company in 1991, it was not as a wrestler, but as the host of his own interview segment, The Barber Shop. The segment became a staple of Federation programming and was the setting for one of the most famous turns in wrestling history when Shawn Michaels super-kicked his partner, Marty Jannetty, and threw him through a plate glass window. The moment launched Michaels' singles career and cemented the barbershop as an important part of Federation lore. In 1993, he would finally return to the ring. He teamed with his old friend Hulk Hogan to form the Mega Maniacs. Their main feud was with the villainous tag team of Money Inc., a storyline that focused on his real-life facial injury. They would challenge for the tag team championship at WrestleMania IX, but despite gaining some revenge, they would lose via disqualification. This was the final televised match of Brutus Beefcake's Federation career. After leaving the company in 1993, Edward Leslie's career was a series of odd and often forgettable gimmicks in World Championship Wrestling. His time here was a parade of bizarre and ever-changing personas, from the Butcher to the Zodiac and the infamous Booty Man. He even returned as the disciple, Hulk Hogan's bodyguard. None of the gimmicks ever clicked. He was a shell of his former self, a man who once had the charisma to captivate millions, but was now just an afterthought. The tragic mistake of the parasailing accident took away his momentum, his face, and his career. He was never able to reach the heights he was destined for. He was a man who, at the peak of his power, was on the verge of superstardom. He had the charisma, the skills, and the perfect gimmick to become one of the biggest stars in the industry. But one random cruel moment snatched it all away. In 2019, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame by his old friend Hulk Hogan. It was a moment of redemption, a recognition of all the years he had spent in the ring and all the joy he had given to the fans. It was a fitting tribute to a man who, despite everything, never gave up on his passion for professional wrestling. But for those who knew him in his prime, and for those who witnessed his incredible rise, it was a bittersweet moment. Because we know what could have been. We know that Brutus the Barber Beefcake wasn't just a run-of-the-mill mid-card act. He was a man on the verge of a championship run, a man poised for greatness. But one tragic mistake, one single moment of bad luck, took it all away and left us with the lingering question of what if. And in the end, Brutus Beefcake isn't just remembered for the fame he reached, but for the greatness he was cruelly denied.